it's a very well-known case. It's almost 30 years ago. This happened on September 15th, 1994, the 90s, in southern Africa, in Zimbabwe, near the capital, which is called Harare. This is a little town near there called Ruwa, R-U-W-A, Ruwa. And it took place at a school, like a religious Christian school.
Kind of a private school.
A private school with a lot of young kids, anywhere from the ages of, I think, 5 to like 13, 14. Some of the oldest kids were like 14. And it was 62 of them, I believe, out at recess. This was unusual that there were no adults at that time. Usually there were adults, but the adults said they were all in doing some kind of administrative thing.
They had a teacher's meeting.
And
I believe there were actually more kids than that, possibly. But one of the things was they didn't interview the grade 1s and grade 2s. They only did from grade 3 up.
Ah, okay.
So they actually think there were many more than that, than 60.
Well, this is an amazing thing because, I mean, on the one hand, you know, if you're a hardcore skeptic, you're like, oh, a bunch of little kids, how can I take this seriously? But these kids, these are not normal kids. Like, they're just not normal kids. I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. To anyone who says that, you have to watch the footage for yourself.
You have to. And plus, they were as old as 13 and 14. Some of these were, like, young adults almost. They were very highly sophisticated. But all these kids were incredibly well-spoken.
Yeah.
They're just remarkable and very descriptive and very sincere and consistent with what they saw. So it's really, you can't discount them.
Well, I think
and now they're adults. They're all adults still talking about it.
One of the main powers of this film is that you do get to see their original testimony at that age.
Right.
You get to look for yourself into their eyes, into their body language, and you get to see that sincerity and make that judgment for yourself. And then we get to meet them again when they're older. And so it's very rare that we have a case where you get original footage like that, and then you get the commentary at the current age.
So the kids were at recess, and I remember the boys describing like they're playing some kind of football or soccer game. They're out there, and the girls are doing whatever they're doing, and they see a silver object in the sky, and their descriptions are quite consistent. It's very elusive. So it's like it's over in this part of the sky, this moment, then it's somehow either it moved really quickly or just appeared in another place. There's a beam. There was a sound that frightened them.
Well, there's this shining light. It was a sunny day, so there's reflection that was also adding to this confusion, you know.
Yeah.
But they all consistently saw this craft, right?
Yeah.
And as far as the sound, they went from describing it like an electrical buzzing coming from everywhere, and all the kids described it in a different way, right? And then you had some of the
different, but consistent, fundamentally consistent with each other, I would say.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have some kids describing it like a flute sound, but it wasn't just one child doing that. And, you know, it was very unusual, the whole sound experience for them. It scared a lot of them.
Yeah, that's good to mention. And so then at some point, this object lands. They all see it land. It hovers and lands, or hovers, or it's like either it lands or it hovers very low, but you get the impression that it landed, actually. There's a field like just beyond the boundary of where the playground was, which especially at that time was kind of undeveloped. So the thing lands there. They see two beings. I think it's really two. They often describe these beings as black, like very dark color. I don't know if that was, I think, what they were wearing.
Well, the thing is, you see in the film, this is where the differences are. Some kids describe them as black beings.
Yeah.
Some kids describe them as, and it also depends on their ages, right?
Right.
Some kids describe them as wearing a black suit.
Yeah, that's it.
And that there was a different colored face. Because some kids got a better look at the face and look at the body. Some kids were a lot closer than others, right?
Yeah.
And there was the bright sun as well. So, but they generally were saying they were dark figures that was what stood out to them. Well, that was one of the things that stood out to
They were
them.
short. They basically are described very consistently with gray aliens, as we would say. So you have all the kids
Right.
talking about the eyes. Some of them, I think, did describe black wraparound type eyes, but others did not exactly describe eyes that way. Is
Well,
that right?
most of them they had either show with their hands and show how big they were on their face.
Like almonds at an angle
Yeah,
coming
they were
out.
all
Yeah.
sort of doing this.
Yeah.
And when John Mack was there, he was getting a lot of them to draw it, and they ended up
Right.
looking like what we would consider the big, oversized eyes. And that was very consistent for them.
They were short. One little girl said they were about the size of a grade 6, which I thought that was perfect, you know. She was this
Yeah.
little kid. So, you know, the size of what, an 11-year-old or
Yeah.
something like that.
And as far as there being two beings, this is something that they really go into. And you can see for yourself when you watch the movie that they were elusive. They were a
Right.
lot of the kids were having a hard time describing how they were moving, and that they were kind of popping in and out, and they were gliding.
Yeah.
And so it seems that I think one of the children said it moved somewhere and then it sort of popped and it was back somewhere else. So there was this popping in and out, which made it confusing because some thought there were 3, some thought there were 2.
It's very easy for people to forget you have someone who has a UFO experience or an alien encounter, which is even beyond seeing a UFO. Our whole culture, even today, I mean, it's a little more open today, but really, if someone has an experience of that magnitude, how in God's name do you talk about this? There's still so much cultural resistance to getting into this. And when you're a little kid, a lot of these little kids were not able to process this properly. Thank goodness they had John Mack, who really helped them a lot. But even in the aftermath of that, a lot of them as adults said, you know, I basically shut down for years. I wouldn't talk about this for years after that. Because how do you do that?
Right.
They didn't know. And in Emily's case, I think it was extreme because her family just left the country. And so she lost her friends.
Yeah.
And her family apparently wasn't open to talking about this for a long time. You get the impression she's good. Like her mother, she and her mom talk about this now, but it took many years. And so it was hard.
Well, I mean, that's one of the fundamental things for people is reconciling something like this with your current world paradigm. And it
Yeah.
usually doesn't work so well together. However, you hear a lot of these kids as adults saying they do believe in God. You know, they do have a religious framework, and it does fit in for them because they believe in God and they believe there's so much more that they don't understand, and that works for them,
Exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
So, but I also want to bring up, to your point, one of the scenes was when John Mack was talking to the teachers after this had just happened, right?
Right.
And some of his words are so important. You know, he was just telling them that he really needed to encourage the open discussion, and that this isn't about what we believe as the parents, as the adults. This is about their experience and trying to be receptive to that experience, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm talking about that not just because of what is in the movie. I'm talking about that because of what we have going on today as well, right? It's just a good philosophy, I think.
Yes, he said that, and I feel a need to tack on something here, because when he said this is a huge, hundreds of parents were at this meeting in
Well, that
Harare.
particular one was the staff meeting.
A staff meeting, but even so, he talked about like the need to recognize the importance of what these kids were saying, and if someone's not listening carefully, they could interpret that as a very relativistic statement, like, well, this is their truth. Doesn't have to be your truth. And in a way, he was saying that because I think he was being a little sneaky. He was trying to like get these adults to accept what these kids were saying. But what was also obvious is that he completely accepted and believed the physical truth of what these kids were saying. I just think like that has to be made clear. John Mack said it to the group of parents, I'm a child psychologist. I am trained to identify when a child is confabulating or lying or
That's
making
right.
something up.
Right.
He says, I'm telling you, these kids were not doing any of that.
That's right.
He said, these kids were telling the truth. They're credible. And I don't know if he explicitly said, I believe them, but that's basically what he said.
He did.
Yeah, he said, I believe them.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing. The other thing I just want to mention before we forget, relating to Emily. So Emily has done, I don't know how many, countless pieces of artwork about her experience and her encounter. I mean, a lot of them are really quite powerful and really nicely done, really well done. But one of my favorite parts of this film was when, like, she went back to Ruwa and she knew that she had a childhood piece of artwork that she had done.
Right.
In the aftermath.
Right.
And it was lost to her.
Yeah.
And she goes back to one of the teachers or the school, and the teacher had it. Mm-hmm. And you see, this is really a beautiful moment for several reasons. A, she gets this important thing that she had created, but also her drawing as an 8-year-old kid was totally consistent.
Yes.
With everything that she had painted and drawn in later years.
Yeah, you could see it really validated this memory for her.
Yeah. I mean, it was spot on. It was almost exactly the same. And I think she got a lot of satisfaction out of that, which was good. So there are a lot of really good moments in this film that were like that I think, it from a strict UFO research point of view, there's a lot in here that's valuable. But from a human, just like, relating to other human beings, there's a lot in there that goes in that direction as well.
Yeah, me, I always love the psychological story, and I think it's really important, and it doesn't get told a lot, especially when we're talking about experiencers.
Yeah.
And there's one thing I wanted to add about John Mack when he was speaking to the town hall of parents, which, by the way, was hundreds of people.
Right.
Because, something had been going on there for a week, and they all wanted to know what was going on. But John Mack talked about this other phenomenon of, when we don't listen, like the children know something happened, and when they get told it's their imagination, forget about it. He said, there's this thing that happens, and I call it going underground, because they shut down this part of them. And he doesn't say this part, but he implies it. There's a psychological imprint that's left there, that creates a problem. So I think that is sometimes a seed of trauma, right?
Sure.
When they don't get to talk about it. So
yeah, for sure.
I thought that it was a really important statement. And Emma, who was one of the girls who was there, made this really important statement too. She said it sort of left them in a state after it happened. When they didn't, they got to talk about it with Cynthia, they got to talk about it with the reporter, they got to talk about it with John, but it kind of went away after that. And she said it leaves you in this limbo state of, am I safe or am I not safe?
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't remember that. That's interesting.
And it's a really fundamental human question that relates to them, but it relates to all of us when we have something that really, breaks our
they don't know how to
walls
get
of reality.
They don't know how to get closure on it. Yeah, how do you understand this? How do you process this? You're playing in the schoolyard. These aliens come down and interact with you for 10 or 15 minutes. Kind of mind-blowing experience. The craft leaves. You're like, what just happened? You go running to the adults, and they're like, they don't know how to accept this.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then you spend the rest of your life thinking, what just happened?
Yeah.
Like, that's, here I am. I'm 9 years old. How do I deal with this?